Hey, so today we're going to talk about this, Life and Death, Twilight Reimagined by Stephenie Meyer. I was initially very excited to read this. I was like, oh my goodness, it's like a whole book and it's going to be weird and strange and interesting, and I've never heard of a book that's been gender swapped before. If you don't know, this is Twilight, but it just has, well actually this book has like Twilight on this side. Like if you read from this side, it's Twilight, the original Twilight, and if you read from this side, flip it over, then it's Life and Death. That's why it's so massive. But yeah, this is Life and Death is Twilight, but Bella is a boy named Beau, and Edward is a girl named Edith, and everyone else basically is gender swapped, so everyone who was a guy is a girl in this one, and everyone who was a girl is a guy in this one. I was just excited and interested, and I really wanted to read it, and so I went to look at the ebook because I wanted to read it immediately, and it was $19, and I was like, no thank you. That kind of just put me off of reading it, because no. But then I saw it in stores and it was $19 there, and I was like, okay, that's okay, so I bought it, and once I had it, I basically had to read it immediately, so I read it. If you're thinking about reading it and you're not sure, then the reasons to read it are because it's different and it has changes and it's interesting and sort of funny at times to see those changes. The characters have different names, and those names are interesting when you see what Rosalie's name is and when you see Esme's new name. I was like, I did like a double take when I saw their names. They have some names. And yeah, there's a lot of differences. It's interesting. It's a very unique reading experience, I guess, to have a book that's gender swapped. I don't know of another book that does this, and so it's kind of like a different reading experience. And also the ending is different, so you get to experience a different ending, and that's all I'm going to say about that. The reasons not to read this book, it's really hard not to compare this book with Twilight. This book is Twilight, but it's different. And I noticed all of the changes, and I was kind of just like, that's different. Oh, that's different. Why is that different? Why is that different? Like, it was just, the whole time I was being distracted from the book by things that were in the book that were different. And that was sort of strange at first. It was weird and just distracting and strange. I said strange already, but yeah, it was weird, and I don't know, it's part of why it's sort of different and unique, I guess, as a reading experience, but at the same time it was difficult to get into and weird. And then also, if you didn't like Twilight, you're probably not gonna like this book. I think that's kind of obvious, but less obvious. If you did like Twilight, you might not want to read this book. I really liked Twilight when I read it. I had a great reading experience. Everyone I knew was reading it. It was like the first book I read. It got me into reading. I really enjoyed reading it. It was just great, and it was like, I have like really fond memories of Twilight, and I know that it's not perfect and that it has a lot of flaws, but I've just sort of left it there in like my happy reading things, experiences. And so I was worried with this one that because I would be comparing it so much, and because I would be sort of critically comparing it, that it would ruin Twilight for me, and I'd be, I don't know, I would see the flaws more like in my face than just acknowledging them. I'd have to like actually read them. And yeah, it was just, I was wary of that. I don't think that it did that. I think that I was able to sort of look at Twilight and read Twilight again in this different way and still have my happy reading experience that I had with it all those years ago. The other thing I wanted to mention also is the title. Life and Death by Stephenie Meyer. Life and Death. Why? That's like when you have to like choose a group name for like some thing in class, and someone in the group is like, hey, let's name our group Life and Death, and you're like, no, that is a terrible no. If Regina George was in my group, I'd turn to her and I'd be like, that is the ugliest effing title I've ever heard, and she'd be like, yeah. So now I'm gonna go through the book. I have some parts tabbed, highlighted, that I want to talk about. This part is going to be spoiler-full, obviously, so if you have not read this book and you want to, and you don't want it to be ruined, I guess, because I'm going to talk specifically about the changes and about the end, then don't watch this part of the video because we're going to get into the changes. Here we go. The first thing is when Beau shows his clumsiness for the first time. He's leaving the airport terminal and he trips and stumbles, and his bag swings around and he hits this guy, and the guy looks at him and there's tension, and there's a girl next to the guy, and the girl looks at Beau as well, and then they see Charlie, Beau's dad, and Charlie is in police uniform, and they are like, oh my gosh, police, and then they leave. It felt so weird in the book. I was just like, what was that? Like, it was weird, it was strange, it was unnecessary, and I know it comes back later on because they're the people who attack Beau, but even with that, it just felt like bad writing. The next thing is when Bella gets to the house, and she unpacks and stuff, she lets out a few tears, and later on in the night when she's like going to sleep, she cries. Beau does not cry. Instead, what does it say? Instead, he lets his thoughts get dark. What do you mean you let your thoughts get dark? What dark thoughts is Beau having? I really cannot imagine what he's thinking about. I mean, he's like sort of depressed because he's in a new place and, you know, he doesn't want to be there, but at the same time, why couldn't he have just cried? One of the most disappointing changes, something I was like looking to see if it would change, is going from Bella with her rose-smelling hair to Beau with his detergent-smelling shirt. Like, okay, I sort of understand that you needed to change it. You didn't really need to. He'd smell like roses. Like, I don't think he can smell his hair because it's not long. But like, his shirt can smell like roses. The fabric softener he uses could be like rose-scented. But like, okay, you changed it. Why did it have to be detergent? Rose to detergent. The next change I want to talk about is when Beau is like, he smells the blood and he's sort of like fainting as he's leaving the class, and Edith comes to help him to the office. I was really, really, really hoping she would pick him up. Like, she like sort of holds him up and he's like, oh, she's really strong. But like, I was really hoping she would just lift him up into her arms and just sort of like hold him there. That would have been so awesome. I did really like the whole, I have a weak vasovagal system and it's a neurally medicated syncope. That was really funny. It was sort of bantery with her and I really liked that. So Beau and Edith are having their dinner, they finish it, and Beau is like fumbling for his wallet and Edith pays. She's like, my treat, and he's like, but, and then she's like, try not to get caught up in antiquated gender roles. Okay, let's just chat about this for a second. In the prologue, Stephenie Meyer talks about how one of the reasons that she wrote this book was to sort of be like, the human is the weak character because they're human and they're surrounded by supernatural beings, not because it's Bella and she's a girl. If it was a guy, it would be the same deal. He would be the weak character in this position because he's the human and he doesn't have supernatural abilities. And I think she was sort of successful in showing that the human character is weak, and it doesn't matter if they're a girl or a guy, it's because they're human. However, I don't think that that was the main problem with Twilight. Maybe she was told that, and maybe she heard that criticism a lot, but for me and what I've read, and I haven't read that much, but from what I can see, the main thing that's wrong with Twilight, or one of the main things, is the relationship between Bella and Edward. He stalks her, he follows her, he watches her sleep at night, and he's controlling, and she sort of is just like, okay, you're pretty, I'm fine with it. And that doesn't really change with this. Edith watches Beau when he sleeps, she follows him, she stalks him, she's controlling, maybe not as controlling as Edward, but still, it's not the healthiest relationship. And then we get to this line, the antiquated gender roles. One of the things about Bella is she likes to pay for things herself, get things herself. She doesn't want people to do things for her. She's very independent. She's sort of the parental figure for her parents. And I really like that about her. Like, she is very responsible and she is independent and she sort of has her life together and she like does what she needs to do. And, you know, that was a good thing for me, but here, it sort of feels like that is being replaced. Like, instead of, I don't want you to pay because I can provide for myself, it has become, I don't want you to pay because I'm the guy and you're the girl. And that seems like the opposite of, like, not antiquated gender roles. Like, that seems like antiquated gender roles. And this line sort of, I don't know if I'm going overboard with this, but I feel like it was sort of Stephenie Meyer congratulating herself a little bit. And I'm like, no. You don't get that award. I'm sorry. There were a few things I knew for sure. For one, Edith was an actual vampire. For another, there was a part of her that saw me as food. But in the end, none of that mattered. Because you know what? The original of this is better. About 3 things I was absolutely positive, is that what it is, I think? Is so much better. Just, I don't understand why this was changed. I mean, it's fine. But I feel like that's just one of those lines from Twilight that you sort of remember. It was in the movie. And this is just so, it's just here, and it's like, it doesn't feel as like big of a deal, I guess, as the original. Like, I don't know, there were a few things, not even telling me how many things, just a few. The thing where Beau goes up to Taylor and he's like, I can't go on with this anymore, I can't be like a pawn in your game or something. That was so awkward. I actually really liked that though, like, it was funny and it was an interesting change. But yeah, it was so awkward. Another difference is that where Bella asks about marriage, Beau asks about sex. First of all, the reaction is different. Edward, I think, was more, sort of like no, like immediately, I think. I don't exactly remember, but I feel like he sort of was like, no, that's not happening. But Edith sort of was like, I did climb into your bed, Beau. I believe that makes this line of inquiry quite understandable. And then she's like, no. It's weird that they're talking about marriage. But it's also sort of weird that this was a change that happened. I don't know. I don't know what I think about this. What do you guys think? Then we come to the end, which is the biggest change, which is where Beau becomes a vampire. And when this first started to happen, I was so confused. Because I was like, wait, what? I was very surprised. I was like, what's going on? And then chapter 24 is called Change, and I was like, oh my gosh. And it starts, I ended up changing my mind. And I was like, okay, so wait, you're not becoming a vampire? Like, and then it just didn't address that. Like, it just went on, and I was like, okay, you're becoming a vampire because nothing's happening, you're just continuing with the process. But then, we get to around here, where this post-it note is, and the info dumping happens. I marked this part because this is where they talk about Arrow and Sulpicia. I have no idea how to say the name. And about Mele, and about how Arrow, like, was killed or something. And yeah, that was interesting. I liked, the ending was interesting because it was an alternate ending, and we, got to see and hear all this information about what would have happened, and there's a lot of information, and I think it's interesting, and it was interesting to read. But looking at it as like a book, it was a very strange, not very well written end. It was just a lot of info dumping. I've never had a book info dump on me at the end of the book. So that is what I thought about Life and Death by Stephenie Meyer. I am glad that I read it, and it was really interesting, and I really like talking to you guys about it and all the changes. If you have any thoughts, tell me in the comment section below about the changes, about reading it, about how it was if you read it, how did you like it or not like it. And yeah, hope you enjoyed this video and found it interesting, and I will see you next time. Bye!